good chunk of time. Andy Polaine.
Oh, okay, that was the shortest intro in the world. Is this one on? Am I on? Am I on? Hi. And I'm suffering from a bit of a cold, so if I break into a coughing fit, just, lay me on the ground and, I don't know, pour wine down my throat. There's obviously something to do with, as you get older, you kind of look back on your life and think about the early days. I went to college to study film, and then I got distracted by a Mac LC2 and Photoshop 2.5, McQuarrie Director 3, just after MediaWorks, what was it called? MediaWorks. But the filmmaking thing I did quite a lot of in my degree, and it really stuck with me even as this sort of nascent field of what is now called interaction design was growing. So I'm going to talk about that a bit, and much like Henry, I'm also not brilliant at planning, and so this is a bit of a smorgasbord. And so today's menu is kind of slightly disjointed. There's a rant. It's not a very well, actually. Just hearing those job kind of shout-outs, it might be a bit of a rant. There's an analogy, and because that's all the rage tonight, and a method. And the method's very simple, but I thought I'd kind of leave it with you as a sweetener. So the rant is about this thing between products and services. So I started off doing film. I moved very swiftly before I graduated into it was called multimedia authoring back in the days when people used to make things that went on CD-ROMs and even floppy disks. And then that became a thing called interaction design. But I was always interested in designing for organizations and thinking about organizations in terms of a design problem. And one of my favorite quotes, which is really hard to attribute because it's usually given to Marshall McLuhan, the famous 60s media theorist. But his friend, who's the guy on the left here, Father John Calkin, he sort of said it about Marshall McLuhan, and Marshall McLuhan liked it so much he kind of started using it. And in fact, they both stole it off Winston Churchill, who almost certainly stole it off someone else. And it's this: we shape our tools, and thereafter they shape us. And the sort of industrial mindset, the way that most management is set up, which is, including all the people in this building, comes from, it rose around the sort of Industrial Revolution. And you'll all know of Henry Ford and the assembly line, and this is actually the assembly line on strike, but nevertheless an assembly line. And the way that model works is you take something that's really complicated and you break it into bits, and you make each person do their bit, and they don't have to talk to each other. So, I'm treading someone's handbag. Sorry. There's a wallet in there too. So the guy putting on the wheels at one end doesn't have to know or talk to even the guy putting on the headlights at the other end, and that works for industrial products, where the design of them doesn't change from one end of the assembly line whilst they're being built to the other end. And really, this is then defined the way most organizations are structured, which is in silos. And silos are just an assembly line, right? So one department comes up with something, gets passed to the other, and you'll all know this, you'll all know this from waterfall. Right? Waterfall's still a thing, even in agile land. I know it's still a thing. We come across it a lot. The structure of this is top-down command and control. Right? No one ever reports bad news upwards. We all know that because people are scared. And often what happens is the different silos don't really talk to each other. In fact, they're often in competition with each other. Right? And you sometimes get that ridiculous thing of, I have to spend my budget before the end of the year, otherwise I don't get it the next year, which is such a bizarre thing. I've saved some money, so you're going to take it away from me next year. And so these kind of departments get in silos with each other, and they're in competition with each other. and they're trying to compete for the same resources. And in this model, you see I've just chosen a few here. Customer service, that used to be called claims not long ago, which tells you a lot about the relationship that those companies had with their customers. Now, the industrial way of thinking has kind of served us really brilliantly for a lot of those products, and it's changed our way of life. It's also created masses of havoc as well. But now we're in a post-industrial age, and of course the thing we all talk about now is networks, because those are the tools that we use all the time when everyone's talking about networks, and so that's the thing that's defining us. But there's been this linguistic shift, and it's come mainly from Silicon Valley. Which one of these glasses is mine? I think this one here. I'm the one with the cold, so I don't care. Which is the rise of the product owner, right? And the product manager and so forth, and product designers. And I had a little kind of frisson with James Garrett a little while ago when he said, so there's a lot of product owners and designers in the audience, and I went, by that you mean digital products, right? Not actual things you hold in your hand. And he said, well, look, we can argue about semantics if you want. But, you know, ask someone in Guantanamo Bay whether they are a prisoner of war or whether they're an enemy combatant and therefore don't have the same rights as a prisoner of war, or a terrorist and so forth, or an illegal immigrant or someone who's a refugee. And semantics are very, very important because they shape the way we think about the world. So none of these things here is a product, right? These things, even the Amazon Echo, which is a physical thing that you can hold in your hand, is still just a plastic cylinder if it doesn't have the service infrastructure behind it. Right? All of these things are services. I'm does anyone work for Squarespace in here? I don't know if they have a sort of Australian bit. I'm very, very sure that Squarespace have product managers and owners. Uber is a classic one. It's not a product. The app is not a product either. Right? The app is an avatar, it's a touch point of the service ecosystem. And as you've seen, that's been incredibly powerful because they're gradually kind of spread across all these different areas. The problem when you think about products and those services as if they're products is it starts defining your mindset. And what I've started hearing recently, and this is the sort of rant, is, so the one I heard of recently was about Shopify. And we were having a discussion online, and some of the Rosenfeld authors, and someone was talking about, well, so there's the kind of enterprise Shopify product owner, and then there's the small business Shopify product owner, and I was like, and then there was a sort of argument about content, or is that product content, or is it marketing content? With a kind of service design ecosystem head-on, you don't have that conversation because it's all part of the service, right? Services are end-to-end. The strategy, the business position, the value proposition, as much as the design of the thing. As a coder who decides to change a label because no one's defined it, right down at the other end. Or the member of staff who hates the place they work for, and therefore they're really kind of rude on the phone. So even things like this, which are actually products, so things you can hold in your hand, and we can't really hold that in your hand, things you can touch. An ATM machine is nothing without the rest of the service. It's nothing without someone filling it up with money. Here's the little man who sits inside the ATM machine and gives you the money every time you put your card in. And they're obviously part of a kind of product service ecosystem, right? And that's really, really important because in an ecosystem, every part affects the whole, and the whole affects all the parts. If you decide to shift the value proposition or the strategy of a business or a brand, so imagine something going from paid for to freemium, for example, right? That has to ripple across all the different touch points. Someone has to kind of communicate that in some way, and all of the way you design all the different parts changes. At the same time, some small thing, if you put a predator in here, it will absolutely kind of wreck everything else. So one small thing, who's from Melbourne in here, or who's kind of been to Melbourne and experienced the Mikey? The joys of Mikey, right? I have a whole 10-minute talk about how that's broken. Right? But Mikey's a really good example of several touch points ruining the whole ecosystem and costing an awful lot of money. So when you're kind of thinking in products, it's really easy. In product land, I sell you a product, and I don't really. It's like a one-night stand. I do a lot of marketing and web and advertising to seduce you. You're enjoying this. But once I've had my way with you and I've sold you my product, I don't want to hear from you anymore. There's 2 times when you get in touch with me, or we get in touch with each other. One is the booty call, right? When I go, like, listen, would you like another one? The other one is the other way around, which is the customer complaints thing, which is, I've just been to the doctor and I think there's something you should know. And in that situation, as a lot of companies do, I'm going to do the least amount possible, or I'm going to do the most I can to make sure I don't actually interact with you anymore. So, the other thing is with the product thing is I see a lot of product demos of iPhones and people holding an iPhone against a white background or a black background, but that's not how people live and work and use those things. This is all part of a complex ecosystem, not only with Apple and everything else, but also in my life, right? So tomorrow, I will be a husband, a father. I will be a photographer. I will be some kind of cultural curator, if you want to go for that, sharing my brilliance on Twitter. I'll be a design director. I'll be a mentor, and all of those different things. And we switch between those roles really, really rapidly with these things. And it's because that you really need to think about the ecosystem, and that people are designing, they're having activities, they're doing activities in context, right? And they're not users who are using a kind of a thing against the white background. Don't you just want to know what happened after this photo? Actually, if you Google pictures of people texting while kissing, there's a surprising amount of them. I like to keep the IT guys busy. So that's my rant. So my rant is really to stop thinking in terms of products. And one of the things that that's a really lame segue into this is that I started thinking about a cultural product that has equal amount of vested interest in the experience, has a lot of financial impact, and it has a lot of money behind it and a lot of risk involved, and is logistically really, really complicated. And one of them that I always come back to is filmmaking. And what's interesting about filmmaking is it's kind of the opposite of lean, right? It's very, very fatty, in fact, as a sort of process. But what's interesting about it also is, in its kind of iterative way, is that you try and make the whole thing the best you can over and over again in different forms, and it really kind of switches all the time. And there's a lot of analogies to the kind of work we do. One of them is that it's a multidisciplinary activity. So we have service designers at Fjord, and we have people with that title. But I'm fairly convinced that really service design is a multidisciplinary activity that a multidisciplinary team of people do. So a sound person, an actor. I love Mark Hamill's face here. Like, he's sort of just kind of going to Darth Vader. You've got the director, the cinematographer, all the people involved. They're all filmmakers, right? But they also have their own specialisms. And I think sometimes we forget that. And when I hear there's a lot of kind of, well, is that UX? Is it service? Well, I don't know. We're a group of people in the room trying to kind of fix a problem, and we each kind of do have some strengths in certain areas and identify certain things. But I would really struggle to say what I actually am as a kind of, I don't even know if I was going to say a creative individual who does that stuff, but that sounds really pompous. Just as a kind of person trying to do some things. But interestingly, filmmaking also has this kind of scalable model. So you sometimes get a kind of indie documentary film crew, and it's sort of 3 people, and the cameraman's also the sound man. Hello. And is also going to edit it later on, and the director's the producer and the writer and so forth, and the interviewer. But sometimes you get a kind of indie film that's maybe got a crew of 60 people, and you'll get individual roles of director, producer, and so forth. And then you get a feature film that's got a director, first assistant director, second assistant director, third assistant director. Right? So it just kind of scales up. But actually, the kind of facets of those of the work remain fairly similar. It's just a lot more work to be done. The other thing is that it's unusual in that there's a kind of writing that is not actually meant to be read by anyone, apart from certainly not meant to be read by an audience. So a screenplay is written to be read by the people who are going to make the film, but it's not actually really meant to be read by audiences, which is unusual. It's kind of weird to write a thing and not want anyone to read it. This is The Adventures of Luke Starkiller, as taken from the Journal of the Wills by George Lucas. So this is an early draft of this thing you might know of as Star Wars. And what's fascinating about this is you just go through this process from treatment and outline to script, trying to make the best version of the thing you possibly can each time. Knowing that if you start off with something mediocre, by the time it's gone through the sausage machine, it's going to be shit at the other end. I mean, if you start at something that's absolutely brilliant, it'll hopefully come out okay at the other end. So the other thing is it's not fixed, right? It's never fixed until it is, and even then it's not, as you'll see. So Han Solo was originally going to be a huge green-skinned monster with no nose and large gills. Harrison Ford would have looked like this. Right, this is from one of the early concept sketches. Princess Leia, some strange kind of fetishist. Even though that, so all of this stuff is done with sort of great skill. So no one's kind of phoning this in and going, oh, do you know what? I'm going to do a really crappy sketch. Look at that. That's Ralph McQuarrie. He's one of the best storyboard and concept artists there was. He used to paint these beautiful things incredibly quickly, and they're not even meant to be seen by anyone apart from George Lucas. Talking of feedback, by the way, I know of someone who works for Lucasfilm, and George Lucas apparently, because he doesn't like giving feedback very much, he would line up all the concept, or have the artist line up all the concept work. And he had two stamps in his pockets, and he just, I can't do it with the mic. He just walks along stamping them, and one says, I think it's Fan Dabby Doozy, and the other one says, with deepest regrets, and he just goes to... Talking of limits, actually, that same guy, he was the guy who designed Darth Maul, and George Lucas said, I want you to come up with your worst nightmare. And he went, so here it is, and George Lucas went, oh, okay, second worst nightmare than that goes. These guys who do the storyboards are also amazing, and they are turning out 30 of these a day sometimes. I would take a day to do one of these if I was really lucky. So they're kind of putting all of their effort in to do the whole thing, and then they're shooting the film in the script, as it were, and they're trying to work out what that is. They do the whole thing, and they're doing the whole film as a storyboard to try and edit it, because of course this is cheap, right? This is their equivalent of post-it notes. It's cheap to make mistakes at this stage because the most expensive thing is shooting the stuff. And this is an actor called Garrick Hagen, and he played a character called Biggs Darklighter, which no one's ever heard of, right? Because he got cut out of the film. There's one bit when Luke, I think, is about to go off and go fighting, and he goes, "Hey, Biggs!" You might blink and see it in the film. So they shoot a lot of stuff because they know what they need is coverage. It's very fatty. It's not lean because they need to have some options, right? It's not fixed at that point in time. And in fact, what then happens is that it gets iterated again in the edit. So they throw a lot away, and they're not afraid to throw stuff away. I just have to turn this on. It's going to buzz, sorry. This is, let me just turn that off again. It's like a lightsaber, that is. I have to turn up the volume really loud because this is a little clip of Star Wars with Darth Vader's actor's original voice. So hang on, let's turn that back up again. Here we go. It's shit, isn't it? I mean, isn't it rubbish? If you were the kind of business owner, right? If you were the person who was putting all the money into this, you would look. Oh my God! What a disaster! Because it's not finished yet. So a large part of our job, and the reason why all those storyboard artists and those concept artists are doing all that stuff is the magic skill we have, the superhero skill we have as designers is making ideas tangible. And it really do not underestimate the ability to say, oh, what you mean like this? And people go, oh, yeah, or no, I see it, that's actually not what I want after all. And that's, obviously why we do all testing and validation and all those things at various levels. So, that ability he was doing all of those things, Lucas was doing all those things, because back then in particular, no one really understood what he was up to. So he's having to kind of do all these storyboards and concept art to say, no, this is what it's going to look like. I have this vision in my head. Please trust me. Even when Darth Vader sounds like that, and really he's going to sound really menacing. He's not. He just looks like it's a tantrum teenager going. What's interesting about that is that once it gets released, and really, the film is made all over again each time when it's in the editing, that it takes on a kind of life of its own once the fans get a hold of it. So that whole thing about sort of ownership of brands and, and companies when they change their logos and there's this big kind of uproar, because, brands are conversations. And I don't know if anyone knows the Star Wars Despecialized Edition. You can Google it, you will find it. And you will find a way to find it. There's no way to see the original Star Wars that was in cinemas now. There's no digital version. Well, there is now because of this. But prior to that, there's no officially released version of it. It's all been slightly modified. So these people, in their own time, in their bedrooms, because they're lonely, I don't know, are doing all of this work, comping together all of these bits and pieces of all the different films and laser discs and all documentaries and stuff, and cloning bits of scenes to make the thing they want to see. It's amazing. So have a look for that. It's good. So again, it's kind of very fatty, and it's kind of, like I said, it's not very lean. And I want to just have a slight side rant. It's kind of not a full rant. It's a kind of just a sort of one off the side about sort of Agile's dark side, which is here's where I show my age, which is kind of about this. So there is that tendency to go, what's the next thing? We're going to deliver. And when you're very product focused, you're just deliver, and then we're delivering a thing, and what does anyone actually want this or need this or like it? And we have a thing that I've modified again, and which I know a few people have talked about, which is this, right? So not a minimum viable product, but a minimum lovable, I say, service. Other people, some of my colleagues say product, but not for long. Which is that you push something out there, you make something that's kind of a minimum, and it's functional. It's kind of like a Death Star that doesn't really do anything, right? It's functional, but no one loves it. And we really need to make things that people find valuable, they're usable, and they're delightful. Right? And you see Google Wave. It's one of those things. Well, I don't really. What's it for? I don't really. Sorry, and it goes. So we have this all the time. So it means that you have to take in the entire ecosystem whilst you're doing it. You have to kind of do a slice of it each time and not just kind of do the functional thing. And I think one of the things that happens with the product thinking is it can often be very functional and not think of the whole ecosystem. So, when you're doing it, it's really about taking account of the whole thing, and it kind of looks quite boring. I can't show you any of the work we're doing, of course, because the blueprints are the thing that the clients believe are the secret sauce, and they are a kind of important part and a nice deliverable. This is one on the way to being that nice deliverable. This isn't what we deliver. But I think this is the more important bit, which is blueprinting, which is actually doing the work, standing in front of there, having those discussions, going, should it be like this? Should it be like that? That's much, much more valuable than actually the final thing. Because when you make a kind of ecosystem, it just carries on. It never ends, right? Unlike a product that rolls off of the production line and is a kind of finished thing until it just degrades, services just, they carry on going. Healthcare, insurance, finance, telcos, they're all were here before I was born, and they'll be here after we all die. Well, probably, unless Trump comes in. I don't know. So they're ongoing things. They never really end. And so it's a very, very different relationship to it as compared to products. So often I go past this every day. This is I do actually go past this sketch every day. It's on my desktop for a reason. But I go past the real Opera House every day. And what I like about this is that at some point, Utsen's thinking about this. He's not thinking about what colour the tiles in the bathroom are. He doesn't really know maybe even how many bathrooms there are going to be. He might have had a brief saying, an opera house with 3 auditoriums and a restaurant or something. Who knows? Right? It's never finished until it's actually finished, and even then it's not. Right? So when it first released, when it first came out, when the Opera House first came out onto the market, when it was finished being built, it had terrible acoustics, and so they had to kind of modify it again. And then they built a massive toaster next to it. Right, so there'll be lots of different things that will change, and buildings change over time. Book tip, for those of you who don't know, is Stuart Brand's How Buildings Learn. It's fantastic. So I thought I'd finish with a method. It's a very simple one. I've seen lots of designers, lots of design students, I've seen lots of our designers too. They've got all their data, they've got masses of post-it notes on the wall, and there's this kind of hangdog look. There's this kind of bit where they're looking at it all, and they're like, and everyone's sort of sitting at the table like this. And there's this, like, it's too much, right? I don't know what to do with this. And so this is a kind of method to get you from here to there, to get you from the sketch to the thing. And it works like this. It's called the hand. It came from, as far as I know, friends of mine called Mario Guidici and Daniel Hunziker. Hello, if you're watching. I don't know if they stole it from something else. I asked them about it once, and they said, well, I think we just came up with it in a workshop, and when I was doing a workshop with them, we used it, and it was very, very useful. You start with a thesis or statement, and it's really useful if it's something that's slightly provocative, right? It's pushing the boundaries a bit, such as, well, let's use Donald Trump, shall we? Come on. Which is, I don't know, which one of these things to choose? There's so many ridiculousness. Let's say, immigrants are ruining the country, right? The first thing that happens, or the future let's not do that. The future of banking is over, right? The first thing you should be asking me is, what? What's the first thing you should ask me? Why? Why? And the very first thing is, how do you know, right? So show me the proof, show me the evidence. And the nice thing about that is it kind of leads you to a bunch of questions which you're going to find answers to through facts. So you're going to know some stuff. So you might say, well, there's actually fewer immigrants than before, or in fact, banking is doing perfectly well, thank you very much, or not. And then you get the stories. So that's your qualitative research. And then that leads you to an idea, but it's never a fully formed one, right? It's still that sketch of the Opera House. And you start off with that kind of very, very sketchy thing. And the full sequence of the Utsen thing is the initial things are the palm fronds. It took him 4 years to work out how to do the segments of the roof. 4 years. And then you gradually kind of tighten it up. So once you found out some of that, you go, oh, actually, my thesis, my statement's not quite true anymore, but this thing is true. And then you go around the process all over again. So you can just use it as a way to kind of cut through all of that complexity and all of that stuff and just think, oh, I need to take a stance. My biggest complaint, and it's slightly a cultural one, I'd say, but it's also to do with maturity thing, is that you need to have an opinion. Just start somewhere, have an opinion, be prepared for it to be proved wrong and question it by your facts and the stories. But if you don't have an opinion, if you go, well, everyone's opinion's equal, that's just absolute bollocks. It really isn't. I know nothing about football. My opinion about football is going to be far less valuable than someone who knows something about football. And I would name a player if I knew a player to actually talk about. David Beckham. There we go. That's right. Yeah, see? What does he know? The nice thing about this is that it's a brilliant way of pitching your stuff, right? Because when you come around to actually doing the sale, you say something like, banks are going to go out of business in 5 years, and here's why, and you're preempting the question. Well, what does he know? How does he know? And you go, well, I know this because this, and this. And by the way, this is what the human experience of that is. And by this time, your client should be thinking, my God, someone should do something about this. And that's where your idea comes in. And it has to match up to the thesis and statement. Otherwise, you end up with the kind of, banks are going to go out of business unless they will move to wearables. So here's a website I've made. And it's like, well, those didn't match up. So that's my secret tool for you to kind of cut through all of your synthesis and data, and also to sell your wonderful work. So thank you very much. No, I need one. Okay.
Use the force.
I just have to remember where I left it. Oh, hello. Here we go. I'm really terrible at timekeeping, so we've got time for a few questions, but I see a hand over here.
I feel like I should be sort of running up and down this kind of this room. I'm here now. Hello.
And I'm 23 years old. I'm doing master of design in USW, focused on interaction design. And actually, I started doing some UI and UX design 2 years ago. Just want to browse my experience on that in some startup, doing an internship or part-time job. But somehow I feel that in those startups, they don't really, focus on UX, and they just want to make the product as soon as possible. So my question is, because I want to become a professional UX designer in my future. So my question is that how can I get a more professional UX job in here, and do you have any suggestion for the student like me?
Well, there's a room full of people here who may well give you a job. That's one thing, and come to things like this. Yeah, I do have some advice to students in particular, which is my experience. I used to teach at UNSW for a long time, and one of the things I used to notice was quite a lot of students would do their final year project as if it didn't really matter, right? So it was like, I'm doing a student project, so I'm not really going to kind of put my effort into it. And they would often do, they're nothing really until the last few weeks, and then they'd do loads and loads of work, and then they'd come up with their final project, but it's actually kind of like a first draft. And so a screenwriter, I don't know how many drafts George Lucas did of Star Wars, but screenwriters will easily do anything from kind of 7, 8, 9, 10 to 30 drafts of a script. And that's just the script, right? That's not even the storyboards and everything else. And the students who did some work, and they did it as the best they possibly can earlier on in that final year, and they put a lot of effort into it, often a lot of money into it too. And then they went, so I've made this thing, and everyone goes, oh, that's great, it's fantastic, but I'm not really very happy with it, so I'm going to make it all over again. And this, because having made it once, I know all the things that I wish I'd known beforehand, so now I'm going to do it all over again. That was they were the ones who did brilliantly, and they're the ones who now kind of, I'm still in touch with quite a few of them, and they're the ones who are now doing really, really well. So my advice is really to do everything as if it's the final thing. And the other thing is that, you will be what you do today. Right? So you are tomorrow what you do today, and you are today what you did before. So if you keep doing UX work, you become a UX designer. Right? You may be rubbish, or you might be great. That's a different thing. But the work you do today defines what you do tomorrow, because that's all you have to show. So when you go into, if you get that thing sometimes, people, I've been doing loads of work for, I don't know, banks. And but actually what I really want to do is work for Disneyland. Well, if you keep doing work for banks, you're going to get more work for banks, because that's people who are looking for great UXers for banks are going to choose you. Right? But so you have to do some stuff. That's what Henry was saying. You have to go out on a limb and find the limit of things too. And maybe you're rubbish at doing the Disneyland stuff and you're brilliant at doing stuff for banks. So well done, because they pay more.
One more question? No, I had one.
Oh, no, there is one now.
There we go.
Thank you very much, Andy.
Thanks.
I'm one of your ex-students from the University.
Hello. Yeah.
I'm Irene Hanna.
Hello, Irene.
Wonderful talk, and I'd encourage anyone for a mentor to reach out to Andy. Andy, thanks to the project that you guided me on, and I'm very new to UX. I was able to get a job at a bank.
There you go. See, look how that works. See, that's like.
And I just want to say, thank you for being so honest and candid to both yourself and Henry. I think we all, as designers, we're all about storytelling. We're all about telling the true stories, the things that hurt, the things that feel great. So I don't really have a question, but great to meet you.
Thank you. And they're not paying you nearly enough, by the way. So whoever's doing that.